All right, let's talk about a name you've almost certainly heard, probably a million times, but maybe don't fully get. GitHub. It's kind of the secret backbone of the modern digital world. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and really figure out what it is and how it got so huge.
So what is GitHub, really? Well, the easiest way to think about it is like Google Docs, but for code. It's one central place where programmers can write software together, track every single little change, and combine their work without, breaking everything. It's all built on a tool called Git, but GitHub is what put a friendly face on it and turned it into this massive social network for coders. And when I say massive, I mean it. The scale is just staggering. As of 2025, GitHub is home to 150 million developers. That's not just some big number, that's a gigantic slice of the entire planet software community, all building things in the same place. Which brings us to the big question for this explainer, right? How in the world did one single website become the essential, can't live without it library for pretty much all the software that runs our lives?
Well, the story starts like a lot of tech stories do, with a tiny startup that just had absolutely explosive growth. So, picture this. It's 2007. 4 developers start GitHub as this little side project. They weren't trying to build some billion-dollar empire. Nope. They were just trying to solve their own problem, making it easier to work on code together. It was a tool built by developers for developers. And that authenticity, that turned out to be its secret sauce.
And that developer-first focus? Man, it paid off and fast. Just 2 years after they launched, they were already hosting 1 million different projects. By 2012, the legendary venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz dropped a cool $100 million on them. Fast forward just 3 more years, and GitHub's valued at $2 billion, all leading up to that huge acquisition by Microsoft in 2018. What a ride! And this chart just shows you how insane that trajectory was. It took them 2 years to hit their first million projects, or repositories. But then it only took 1 more year to double that, to 2 million. And then, just 2 years after that, boom, 10 million. This wasn't just steady growth. This was a wildfire. The network effect was kicking in, and everybody wanted in.
Which brings us to the next and maybe the most stunning chapter in this whole story, the Microsoft acquisition. For a lot of people, especially in the open source world, this was a moment of total disbelief.
Now, to understand why this was such a jaw-dropper, you got to get that there have really been 2 different Microsofts. You had the old Microsoft, which was famous for being hostile, actively hostile to the whole open source idea. But then you had the new Microsoft under CEO Satya Nadella, which had done a complete 180. By the time they bought GitHub, Microsoft was already one of the biggest contributors to open source projects on GitHub. The irony and the final price tag just sent shockwaves through the entire industry. $7.5 billion. This wasn't just a big price. It was a loud and clear statement that GitHub had become absolutely essential to how all technology gets made. But not everyone was thrilled. A lot of developers like Kyle Simpson and Rafael Laguna were publicly worried. They pointed to Microsoft's not-so-great history with other big purchases, like what happened with Nokia and Skype. The fear was real, and you could see it happen in real time. Competitors like GitLab said they saw a huge spike in people moving their projects over, looking for an escape hatch. So why was GitHub worth so much? Why $7.5 billion? Because by then, it had become so much more than just a place to store code. It had built an entire world, a whole ecosystem around a developer's daily life. This is where GitHub's real genius kicked in. They started building this incredible developer toolkit. With GitHub Pages, you could instantly host a website right from your project. With Actions, you could automate all this complicated stuff that used to need a bunch of other tools. And now, with Copilot, you literally have an AI partner that suggests code to you while you type. The really crucial thing is, by solving more and more of these little problems, GitHub was making itself totally indispensable.
And the ecosystem just keeps expanding. You've got Gist for sharing quick code snippets, sponsors for funding developers directly, kind of like Patreon, and a whole enterprise version for big companies. And then there's this, the Archive program. They are literally preserving all public code in a vault in the Arctic for 1,000 years. Talk about long-term planning.
But look, when you get that big, when you have that much influence, you're going to run into some serious issues. With all that power comes a lot of politics and a whole lot of problems.
In 2019, a major controversy just blew up. It came out that GitHub had a $200,000 software contract with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, also known as ICE. This immediately sparked a huge backlash, both from inside the company and from the wider developer community.
So the company's response was complex. The CEO said the money from the contract wasn't a big deal financially, and they promised to donate $500,000 to nonprofits that help immigrants. But they kept the contract. That decision led to some employees quitting in protest and a big open letter from the community demanding that they drop ICE.
And the ICE contract is really just one example of what happens when you get this big. As a global platform, GitHub has been forced to deal with some really thorny geopolitics, like blocking developers in countries under U.S. sanctions or dealing with censorship demands from governments like Russia and China. And internally, it's had its own storms to weather, from a harassment scandal in 2014 that led to its CEO resigning, to other controversies over employee relations. It's just a stark reminder that being the world's code library is incredibly complicated.
Maybe no one sums up this complicated dual nature of GitHub better than Linus Torvalds, the guy who actually created Git in the first place. He has said that GitHub's hosting is excellent and that they should be commended enormously. But in the very same breath, he has called their system for submitting changes, the famous pull request, pure garbage. And that mix of this is brilliant and this is so frustrating, that perfectly captures how so many of its users feel.
Ultimately, the story of GitHub really shines a light on something deeper. This single platform has become the default archive, the Library of Alexandria for the code that is literally building our future. It's an incredible tool for innovation, no doubt, but it also puts a tremendous amount of power into the hands of just one company. And that forces us all to ask a really profound question. As software builds our future, who should be its gatekeeper? That's something worth thinking about. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.